Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Thursday, August 19th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. It's been another long, dry summer, and with it now comes more talk about conserving water. Southern California's biggest supplier is calling on people to limit their water use, but could this mean restrictions down the road? KPBS reporter Alexandra Rangel has more about what this means for our local water supply.
Conditions are worsening in the western U.S. The U.S. Drought Monitor says more than 95% of the region is in a drought. Continued droughts are forcing the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California to ask water agencies to voluntarily conserve water. Jeff Stephenson is the water resource manager for the San Diego County Water Authority. He says the county is decades ahead in conservation practices.
Here in San Diego, we have a great history of water use efficiency. We've cut water use per person in half over the last 30 years.
The supply alert comes a day after the first ever water shortage was reported on the Colorado River. Although that shortage mostly affects Nevada and Arizona, San Diego does receive 60% of transfer water from the Colorado River, which may seem like a lot, but...
And what makes us in a better position than other parts of the state, especially Northern California, is 30 years ago when we started diversifying our water supplies.
Over the years, Stephenson says San Diego went from having only 2 water supplies to a multitude of sources that include reservoirs, recycled water, and groundwater. He says we'll be facing a real problem if voluntary reductions become state mandates for everyone across the board.
It's too soon to tell really if that's going to happen. But if the state were to do that, we'd like them to offer the stress test again so that we can show this model that we created that the rest of the state could emulate, that we've diversified our supplies, we're prepared for drought.
Stephenson says we'll have to wait and see if we'll be hit with the reduction mandate in the months to come. But for now, he encourages San Diegans to continue using water efficiently. Alexandra Rangel, KPBS News.
San Diego climate advocates are trying to pressure local members of Congress to do more. For the second time this week, they're taking direct action. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has this story from City Heights.
Local climate advocates joined their counterparts around the country to call out for lawmakers in Washington to support the president's budget plan. The blueprint contains more than $3.5 trillion worth of spending on the president's agenda. City Council member Sean Ella Rivera says it would fund projects that bring fundamental change to underserved neighborhoods. He says they should fund electric car infrastructure, lead pipe removal, and expansion of public transportation, among other things.
It should include these things not because they'd be nice to have, but because who's bearing the brunt of climate change is our most vulnerable neighbors, which includes many people in City Heights where we are today and throughout District 9 and all of San Diego.
The climate advocates say it is past time to take action. They argue the latest UN climate report only gives the world 9 years to stave off the worst possible outcomes of a warming planet.
We are in a climate emergency, and we will not have a livable future without bold climate action. Working class Black and brown communities are the ones hit first and worst by the crises.
Advocates are hoping that their call for action will end the political circus in Washington and convince lawmakers to support the infrastructure deal and Biden's new budget. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
This is video from Greenland today and another milepost toward irreversible climate change. For the first time on record, it was raining on the country's summit. That's 2 miles above sea level, where temperatures are usually cold enough for snow. This week, the temperature rose above freezing for the third time in less than a decade. The climate is an even bigger story to our north this week. A red flag warning is in place for the community where dozens of homes have been damaged or destroyed by wildfire. The Caldor fire is being propelled by wind gusts. And take a look at this image that you're seeing, shared by the National Weather Service in Reno. It's showing just how much smoke is hovering over Northern California today. Many of those who evacuated are wondering if their home will be the next to burn. Marissa Perlman has one of those stories from El Dorado County.
The not knowing and the anticipation and the waiting and all that just wears on you.
John Wild waiting here at this Folsom Hotel for news about his Somerset home. He packed up his family and animals and didn't look back, but now he's not sure what's left.
We're watching the heat map, and yesterday it looked like Pac-Man was going to eat our house.
The fire far from over as a CAL FIRE C-130 flies overhead, heading back to the fire zone.
It's not a good thing to see that. Because when you see that, things are extremely serious.
How much hope do you have for your home in Somerset?
Zero. So.
He's seen the damage in his town and nearby Grizzly Flats. His home has been in his family for decades. We headed to Somerset, where the fire exploded overnight, to see what's left. Hey, Joe. How you doing?
Doing all right.
Everything looks good here.
Okay. That's great.
His house in a heavily wooded area off of Caldor Drive, barely touched by fire.
Oh, that's awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
But just a few miles up the road, others weren't so lucky. Joe just happy to see his home standing. But as the firefight continues, he says he still won't be sleeping easy.
Not until we get back there. We'll be fully, have the sigh of relief.
Was Marissa Perlman reporting. San Diego officials are taking bold steps to address the chronically homeless. Plans are underway to open harm reduction model shelters, something that has not been done here yet. The idea is for these smaller shelters to house, not turn away those who have substance abuse issues, where more services can be brought to them.
This is not the kind of folks that we close the door on. These are the kinds of folks that we open the door, invite in, and serve. We know that when we do that, it is far more likely that we can break that cycle of addiction, address the underlying mental health concerns, and ultimately get this person stably housed and off the streets for good.
I know how serious this issue is. I hear about it every single day from my constituents. I know people want us to tackle it and get it done. And that requires us to do new things in new ways. And that's what we're doing here.
Next week, we'll continue our discussion with San Diego Mayor Gloria and Supervisor Nathan Fletcher about this city and county partnership that aims to fill a gap in the homeless service system. For the first time in 6 months, home prices are going down. The Union Tribune reported the median price is now $730,000, but it is not enough of a drop to have much meaning. Data released by CoreLogic indicates the median price is still just over 15% higher in the last year. The peak was recorded in June when the median price was close to $750,000. Analysts say the drop of just over $19,000 is not large enough to indicate a market change. Nearly $80 million. That's how much the city of San Diego has given out in rent relief since the beginning of the pandemic. But as KPBS reporter John Carroll tells us, there's still a lot of relief money available, and not just in San Diego.
The city of San Diego says it's upped its game when it comes to getting rent and utility assistance to those who need it.
We have been very successful in identifying needy renters and landlords who are behind on their rent payments and utility bills.
The city of San Diego has distributed nearly $80 million to more than 9,600 households since the beginning of the pandemic. The second largest city in the county, Chula Vista, has distributed nearly $5.5 million to 838 households. And Mayor Gloria says there's more to come from the federal government and the state.
We have about another $80 million coming to us to be able to do even more assistance.
As much as the pandemic has put major stress on both renters and landlords, Gloria says this assistance money will turn things around for all involved.
The property doesn't go into foreclosure. The renter is not evicted. The city does not have the cascading negative consequences of both of those actions. Absolutely everyone wins.
So as the bad news about the spread of COVID rolls in, at least people don't have to face losing their homes as well. To apply for the rental assistance program, go to the San Diego Housing Commission's website, sdhc.org. John Carroll, KPBS News.
New numbers just in on the local COVID-19 situation. San Diego County is reporting 1,400 new COVID-19 cases. That's an uptake of a few hundred over the previous day. Health officials are also reporting 100 new hospitalizations and 5 additional deaths. We're seeing a lot more bad behavior in public during the COVID era, especially on planes. Now some serious fines might be on the way. The FAA is proposing more than $500,000 in fines in some cases. The agency is looking at around 30 people who were unruly on flights, and many of those incidents involved people violating mask rules. We've seen it here in San Diego and across the country. There's a lot of public vitriol over the return of wearing masks, especially for kids in school. Camila Bernal reports on this new dynamic that's making the job of educators even harder.
Do not conform! As children return to school, heated debates over mandatory mask mandates among parents and politicians.
Masks are effective. This is authoritarianism, and you are virtue signaling.
Health experts say that masks are the most effective way to protect against infection for children under 12 who are not yet eligible for the vaccine.
Even in a school system where you may have vaccinated teachers and some of the children may be vaccinated, you want to wear a mask to protect the children so that they could continue to be in school.
But some governors, like Florida's Ron DeSantis, say parents, not schools, should decide whether their kids wear a mask in the classroom. DeSantis threatened to withhold the salaries of school officials who impose mask mandates. And the Republican says quarantining, quote, healthy kids after a possible COVID exposure in schools should be up to the parents, too.
Parents whose kids very well may already be immune, who may have a passing contact, I think if they're healthy, I think that they should want to get them back as soon as, if they want to get them back as soon as possible, I think the school district should work on that.
But health experts say the risk is far too great.
The risk is not just to that child, it's to the rest of the group.
Thousands of students and employees have tested positive for COVID-19 across Florida's largest school districts since the start of the semester. Camila Bernal, KPBS News.
Facebook is cracking down on coronavirus misinformation. The social media company announced it has taken action against, quote, the Disinformation Dozen. That's a group of 12 platform users that the White House identified as being responsible for spreading the majority of misinformation about the virus. Facebook says it removed more than 36 pages and groups on Facebook and Instagram linked to the 12 people. The U.S. Census Bureau is being blamed for a cyber attack on some bureau servers in January of last year. In a report by the Commerce Department's Inspector General, the agency was aware of the possible vulnerability 3 weeks prior, but then failed to take action to prevent the cyber attack. Hackers used a software flaw to get inside the servers, but the census count was not impacted by the hack. The agency was still using the compromised servers for more than a year. It is not clear who is responsible for the attack. The recently released 2020 census results show Latinos making up the second largest ethnic racial group in San Diego County after white people. But KPBS race and equity reporter Christina Kim says for many people, the census categories do not really work for them.
Chula Vista resident Carolina Juarez immigrated from Mexico 18 years ago. To this day, every time she fills out the census, it's confusing. It asks her to say if she's Hispanic or Latino and then select her race.
I don't identify as African American or Asian or white, so I feel like I'm left out without a box to mark. So so I couldn't find an option that fitted right in, so I just filled in some other race.
The 2020 census shows that many people are like Juarez. Nearly half of all Latinos in San Diego County identify as some other race, a more than 20% increase in the last decade. The growing number of people who mark some other race shows the limits of the census, says Edward Telles, a sociology professor at UC Irvine.
Why should there be a some other race category? Why isn't there a Latino category?
Since 1980, the census has always had a two-format question. It asks if you are Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish, and then your race. That's because it designates Hispanic or Latino as an ethnicity instead of a race. But Thea says the differences aren't so clear.
The traditional way was that race were these people that differed by physical features, and ethnicity were people with cultural differences. Well, we know that there's really a lot of overlap between those.
What we do know from the recent census is that Latinos in San Diego increasingly see themselves as multiracial. The number who mark 2 or more races rose by more than 5 times since 2010. Mario Torres is a mariachi musician who lives in Chula Vista. 5 years ago, he learned more about his multiracial roots through genetic tests and the history of mariachi.
Learning that I have Zapoteco, Purépecha from Michoacán, Oaxaca, and these indigenous tribes, and learning more about my own personal history.
He marked down several races on the census and wrote in that he's Native Mexican American Mestizo. His mariachi group, Mariachi Torres, which includes his wife and 2 kids, sing and play songs in Zapotec and Purépecha, a nod to their roots.
I want to acknowledge also the indigenous part. I want to acknowledge the other parts too.
Why is that important?
Because it's me. If I don't know my history, if I don't know my roots, then I don't have an identity.
People like the Torreses are recognizing their complex racial and cultural identities, both on the census and for the Torres family through their music. Christina Kim, KPBS News.
And one more note on the census. Native Americans, of which many call San Diego County home, are seeing a boost in representation. The census reports Native Americans now make up 3% of all people in the United States, and that is the largest percentage in generations. In all, about 10 million people identified as Native or mixed race with Native. The Census Bureau believes part of the jump is due to an undercount back in 2010. A big honor today for the family of a local war hero. The Poway Post Office on Midland Road was officially dedicated to Ray Chavez, a U.S. Navy veteran who passed away at the age of 106. This is video from an interview with KPBS several years ago. Chavez had been the oldest living survivor of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941. A plaque honoring him was unveiled today in front of his family. The weekend is shaping up to be a nice one with cooler temperatures across most of San Diego. Melissa Constanzer has the forecast.
We are shutting off the monsoon over the next few days, really as dry air hammers its way on in. Of course, that's led to more smoke conditions out there across our state, and it's also led to more wildfire conditions as those breezes kind of cushion from the north, and the overriding flow pattern keeps that dry air through the rest of the southwest. Quiet, though, summertime weather for us as we stay slightly warmer into next week. So around our area, not a whole lot going on tonight. Tonight falling to 70 degrees in the city. Meanwhile, Oceanside coming in at 65. Head to Borrego Springs, lower 70s. A couple of clouds towards the coast, but beyond that, really no chances of rain. We do have some of that marine layer impacting our area. Not a ton of it, but it is out there, and it will be noticeable into tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, throughout the day, basically, we have this northerly flow coming in, at least high in the sky, and that's what's going to drive the weather pattern. It's going to shut off any monsoonal moisture, which is why we'll be so dry out there as we head through parts of southern Arizona and for us, southern California too, through the mountains. Not really any chance of rain as we venture through tomorrow. So tomorrow, 76 for the high. Escondido coming in at 80 degrees, 75 in Chula Vista, and for places like Mount Laguna, near 70 degrees for that high. The next couple of days here, we're actually fairly comfortable as we move through the weekend. Temperatures holding on to the mid-70s for the coast. We'll have those clouds to begin with, and then getting more sunshine through the afternoon. A little bit brighter, though, towards next week is why we'll inch our way up in the temperatures, and that's true for our inland locations, which will work their way into the mid-80s from the mid to upper 70s as we head through the start of this weekend. Getting into the mountain locations, no chances of rain here, fairly quiet. We do get our way back into the mid-70s after a weekend spent in the 60s for afternoon high temperatures, and our deserts holding on to the 90s the next few days, but we'll be back in the triple digits heading into Monday and Tuesday. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
Much of the world's attention is focused on Afghanistan this week, but the situation in Haiti remains dire. Nearly a week after an earthquake that killed nearly 2,000 people, relief and recovery is slow. Matt Rivers updates us on the crisis.
Driving into rural Haiti is not easy. Miles and miles of tough, unpaved roads. But it's at the end of those roads where some of the worst damage from this earthquake lies. This is Karai, a fishing town of 30,000, where hundreds of structures have been destroyed. Guylaine Richard lost everything when the ground shook. I lost my business and my home, she says. I have 6 kids to send to school, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Hers was just the first home we saw. Up the street, we couldn't drive past this home because, like so many others here, what remains could collapse at any moment.
So these guys behind me aren't professionals. They're just locals with hammer, wood, and nails trying to figure out a safe way to bring that severely damaged building behind me down to the ground. They told us in the nearly 5 days since this earthquake happened, they still have not had one representative from the central government show up.
It's a tough place to get to, but as some pointed out to us, we managed to do it, so why hasn't the government? Anger, a persistent sentiment from many. This man's family was injured when their home collapsed.
Do you think that the government can come here and help you?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so.
So you're not waiting for them?
No, no.
And are you frustrated with that?
Yeah, very, very frustrated. I'm very frustrated.
Some blame corruption and a lack of will for government inaction. There's also the recent assassination of Haiti's president, gang violence, and a lack of quality infrastructure possibly at fault. This bridge in the city of Jeremy, in rough shape before the earthquake, now so damaged that heavy trucks like these, loaded down with aid, cannot cross, supplies sometimes hand-carried. No matter the reason, the reality persists. People in need are growing increasingly desperate. I need help, she says, and no one is helping me. So far, it's only God who I think will help me. The place where she might pray for that, the church in the town center, also destroyed. Thankfully, fewer people died during this earthquake compared to previous similar quakes. Imagine, as one person told us, if it had happened on a Sunday morning when church was full.
And we did reach out to Haiti's central government asking, have you sent representatives to Karai to see the hundreds of structures that have been destroyed? What are you planning on doing to try and make the lives of people affected by this earthquake better? They did not respond to our requests for comment. Matt Rivers, CNN, Jeremy, Haiti.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the fall of Afghanistan. The Taliban responds to protests with violence and limits airport access for Afghans trying to flee. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Midday Edition, we'll have our weekend preview. KPBS arts reporter Julia Dixon-Evans will give us her picks for events happening around San Diego. And then on Roundtable, watching the news from Afghanistan through the lens of those who served. What are local veterans thinking about the U.S. ending its involvement in the 20-year war? And as always, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. And we're ending tonight's show with the latest installment of the KPBS Summer Music Series. 8 local artists are featured from a wide variety of genres. You can find all of it on the KPBS YouTube page. Tonight we have Latin jazz musician Bill Caballero, and you can see him perform Thursday nights at Hot Mess Cafe in Barrio Logan. From all of us here at KPBS News, good night.
Public at large, I'd like to invite you to the jam. There's no admission. You can bring children, all ages. You can bring your dogs. You can even bring your wives. So if you're in the neighborhood in Barrio Logan, want to hear some good music and some great food and drink, please come by. Every Thursday from 7 to 10.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.